Hello and welcome to Sleepsmyth, your peaceful place to unwind, dream and drift gently into sleep. Before we start our story tonight, let me help you settle in with a simple, calming breath like a gentle lullaby for your body and mind. So, find a cozy spot, maybe snuggle under your blanket, and softly close your eyes. Now, breathing quietly through your nose for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold that breath softly for 7 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now, slowly exhale through your mouth for 8 seconds, letting all the tension melt away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's do that again. Nice and easy. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One last time, just like a soft whisper. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Feel your body getting lighter, your mind quiet, as if you're being tucked gently into a calm, warm bed. Thank you for sharing this moment with Sleepsmyth. Now, relax completely and let the story carry you into a peaceful, restful sleep. Let's begin.
Up where silence glows, where night deepens into something almost sacred, the sky begins to remember. Lines are drawn between stars, not by science, but by memory, by longing that refuse to fade. They call them constellations, but once they were lives, breathing, aching, rising. Now they shimmer in stillness, figures traced across the sky, not just to guide, but to remember. There is Orion, the hunter who chased dawn across the horizon. His bow now rests among the stars, a silhouette noble and weathered, caught forever between pursuit and peace. There is Andromeda, unbound, her chains now scattered like dust among galaxies. She drifts upward in a gown woven from nightfall, no longer a sacrifice, but a story reclaimed by the stars themselves. And there, the Gemini twins, two souls, one immortal, one not, forever reaching, a bond suspended in starlight, mirrored, indivisible, drawn side by side across the heavens. These are not just tales, they are sky maps of the heart, legends stitched into the firmament. Each star, a breath held long after the voice is gone. So rest now, let the world soften, let the sky lean closer, and as you listen, know this: you are not beneath the stars tonight, you are within them. hunter of the falling dawn, a warrior of the stars, a heart too vast to conquer, and the price of love written in the constellations. When the stars still had footsteps, before he was a constellation, before his name was carved in silver across the heavens, Orion walked the earth like thunder in human shape. He was not born like other men. The sea had stirred under a crescent moon, and the gods, in their strange hunger, had breathed life into foam and silence. From that hush, Orion rose, tall as a pine, eyes like wildfire and shadow. He did not cry when he first breathed. Instead, the wind shifted, and birds fled from the trees. As a boy, he chased the wind across the cliffs of Delos, barefoot, sun-streaked, skin-kissed by brine and light. His steps made no sound, his arrows never missed. He hunted not to kill, but to listen, to belong to the rhythm of breath and heartbeat and leaf. He could match the stillness of a stone, the glide of a falcon. Even the wolves, old and clever, watched him with a kind of wonder. He slept beneath the stars without fear, and they, those ancient watchers, blinked in curiosity above him. Each night, they pressed closer, not to judge, but to remember. The people on the island feared him and loved him. He was beautiful, like fire just before it burns. They left offerings in the trees, whispered his name in their prayers, not as a god, but as something other, as something time itself would not forget. Orion never asked for worship. He moved through the world like he already knew it would vanish, like the earth was something precious and passing, but he had never loved, not yet, not the way the poets meant, not with surrender, not with longing. He had conquered mountains, outpaced storms, but love, the real kind, was still out of reach, still hiding in the shape of a shadow he had not yet seen. And high above, the stars waited, because they knew, soon, he would be theirs. The island where the hunter slept. Delos was an island carved by whispers, wrapped in legend, and cradled by the sea like a sleeping child. Its cliffs bled ochre at sunset, its stones remembered the footsteps of gods. The wind carried forgotten hymns, and the waves spoke in tongues only dreams could understand. Orion called this place home, though home was a word he never spoke. He rose with the stars still glowing pale against the retreating dark. He walked the shore before dawn could touch it, and the gulls, the wind, the hush of waves, all seemed to move around him, not past him. Each morning, he drew his bow and let it sing into the distance, not to strike, but to listen. The strings' hum was music, the echo of tension and release. He hunted creatures that only came when the moon was thin, panthers made of mist, boars with eyes like coals. And when he returned, the sea always greeted him first. The villagers watched from afar. Some believed he could not die. Others whispered that he had once touched the shoulder of a god and lived. Still, they left him gifts at the forest's edge, oranges, antlers, woven charms shaped like stars. He never thanked them, not aloud, but he never stepped over them either. And then she arrived. Artemis, pale as snowfall, with a gaze that saw through myth and marrow. She walked like the horizon, straight and endless. And when Orion turned, sensing her presence before her foot touched earth, the world tilted, slightly, but enough to change everything. They did not speak. There was no need. Their silence stretched between them like a ribbon pulled taut. She watched him, not with judgment, but recognition. He lowered his bow, not in submission, but in awe. That night, the moon hung lower than usual, and Orion, the hunter whose dreams were made of chase and conquest, dreamed of stillness, of silver hair spread across his chest, of arrows left untouched. He dreamed not of beasts, not of glory, but of a single hand, reaching toward his across an endless sky. Her arrows, his heartbeat. The first time Artemis loosed an arrow within Orion's presence, the air itself flinched. It did not fly to kill, but to whisper, a silver shaft slicing the dusk, humming with memory and prophecy. Orion watched it thrum past his shoulder, split a fig on a distant branch, and fall soft, like rain into silence. He turned to her, not startled, but stirred, and she, standing beneath a cedar shaped like a spine, didn't blink. Her quiver held the moon's sharpest teeth, and yet her gaze softened when it rested on him, not out of pity, but recognition, as if she too had wandered the edge of belonging. In the days that followed, they moved together like two thoughts from the same mind, silent, swift, sacred. Their hunts became rituals, not of conquest, but of communion. They tracked beasts long believed to be myth, griffins whose feathers gleamed like oil and fire, hinds whose hooves barely touched the ground. But more than the thrill of the chase, it was their closeness that hollowed out new spaces in Orion's chest. She would walk beside him without speaking, and yet he felt every syllable she didn't say. In the twitch of her fingers, the tilt of her bow, he began to measure time not in stars, but in the rhythm of her breath. At night, they would lie beneath pines that whispered stories older than Olympus, her head just inches from his shoulder, and though they did not touch, the space between them throbbed with something ancient, a promise not yet spoken. And one evening, when an owl called thrice, and even the sea held its breath, Orion reached toward her hand and found it already waiting. A love too bright for the moon to hold. The gods never meant for mortals to touch divinity, and yet, under the bruised velvet of twilight, Artemis laughed, and that laugh, not cruel, but crystalline, shook the sky. She was moonlight made flesh, but in Orion's gaze, she became warmth, a wildfire in a world of frost. Their love was not loud, but it was luminous, like frost on iron, like the hush before snowfall. They did not kiss, not yet, but their silences grew so thick with longing, It was as if time itself dared not interrupt. He brought her offerings, not flowers or trinkets, but the feather of a bird that sang only once every century, a stone warmed by the belly of the earth, a poem carved into the bark of a tree he planted where they first met, and she, who had never let the world soften her edges, let him in. She showed him constellations not even the muses remembered, taught him how to hear the shape of a falling leaf. And one night, when clouds swallowed the stars, she whispered his name like a prayer, as though saying it could keep him mortal a little longer. But Olympus stirred. The other gods watched with narrowed eyes and clenched teeth, for they had woven Artemis into myth, not memory, and Orion, in his quiet way, was undoing centuries of solitude. Still, they did not stop. They met in shadows and stormlight, their hearts loud enough to silence fate. But even the stars, those ancient voyeurs, knew this was the kind of love that could only burn for a while, too bright, too pure, too bold for the heavens to ignore. Scorpion that touched the sky. They say it began with a whisper, a warning carried by the wind, or a jealous prayer muttered beneath a goddess's breath. For not even Artemis, fierce and full of moonlight, could keep the gods from meddling with mortal fates. Orion had grown too bright, too loved, too close to something even the heavens could not command. Apollo, golden and cruel behind his smile, watched them from afar. His sister, the huntress, his equal, now softened in the presence of a man who walked like a storm remembered. And it displeased him, not because of love, but because he feared what love made her forget. So he sent the scorpion, not a beast of flesh, but of shadow and poison, born from the heat of the earth and the bitterness of gods. It crawled across the sands beneath the island, unseen. It moved with the stillness of vengeance, patient as dusk. Orion was alone when it struck. His arrows lay at rest, his gaze lifted toward a sky where birds wheeled in silence. He did not see the sting until it pierced him, not with pain, but with betrayal. The earth cracked beneath his knees. The sun dimmed, as if ashamed. He fell, not like a hero, but like something the world was never meant to lose. The villagers cried to the heavens, but the heavens did not answer. Artemis arrived too late. She ran barefoot through blood-warmed sand, found him collapsed, eyes half closed, whispering her name as though it were a prayer or a goodbye. And in that breathless hush, she wept, not as a goddess, but as a woman who had almost touched forever. Above them, the stars watched in silence, for even they knew this was the moment that would echo forever in their light. What the gods could not kill, they buried him where the tide could reach, where waves would carry his name to every shore, where the sky could press its face to the sea and remember. But Orion's story did not end beneath the sand, for grief, when divine, becomes power, and Artemis, fierce in her sorrow, turned her mourning into myth. She refused to let the gods claim him in silence. She begged Zeus, pleaded with stars, not to undo what had been done, but to let him rise again, not as man, but as memory. So they gave him the sky, a place above storms, beyond jealousy, where no sting could reach, no fate could unmake. She placed him among constellations, with his bow drawn, gaze forever fixed toward the west, chasing the horizon he had once outrun. And the scorpion, that treacherous shadow, was cast to the other end of the heavens, never to rise in the same sky, never to look upon him again. But even in this celestial peace, she visited him. Each night, when the moon was thin and silver, she would walk alone to the edge of the world, where the stars touched the ocean, and there she would whisper stories of deer she did not hunt, of dreams she could not quiet, of how his name had become a hush on every wind. Orion listened, not with ears, but with stars, for even in death, in memory, in myth, some loves are too vast to bury, and some hearts, like his, were never meant to be killed. The endless chase of the Pleiades. They were 7, daughters of the sky, born from the breath of dusk and the songs of river nymphs. Their laughter was light, scattered like dandelion seeds in the wind. And when they ran, they didn't touch the earth, they glided over it, leaving behind petals, dew, and the scent of something just out of reach. Orion saw them first beneath a willow. The air was thick with the hush of approaching rain. He was not hunting, not chasing, just wandering, and they shimmered into view like a mirage made of motion and music. He did not mean to pursue them, but longing, old and sudden, bloomed in his chest like fire through frost. He ran, not to catch, but to follow, to be near their wild grace, to match their rhythm. The Pleiades, forever just beyond him, they glanced back, not in fear, but in sorrow. They knew the gods would never let such beauty be touched, and Orion, for all his strength, would never hold them. Each night, they slipped further into the sky, and still he ran, through orchards, across rivers, over starlit meadows, chasing what he could not name, but needed. It was not lust, nor conquest, but something purer, a longing to belong to something that did not bleed. The gods, amused, eventually took pity. They lifted the sisters into the heavens, one by one, like pearls on an invisible thread, and Orion, in his yearning, was lifted too, not to reach them, but to follow forever. Now they glint above us, a scatter of sapphire across the dark, and he, the hunter of the falling dawn, follows them still, his bow slung low, his stride eternal, not in torment, but in memory, of beauty once glimpsed and never forgotten. And so the sky remembered him. He was not made to last. Even the stars in their silence whispered that truth. But what fades from the earth does not vanish from the heavens. Orion's story did not end with blood or betrayal. It ended with remembering, with the sky gathering the pieces of his name and shaping them into light. The gods could not decide his fate. Too many had touched his life. Too many had loved him in their own way. Artemis, with her ache like frost. Apollo, with his envy coiled beneath golden words. The earth, who felt his footsteps as blessing. And the stars, who had watched him since boyhood. He died once, perhaps more, but the sky would not let him rest in shadow. It opened like a great eye and took him in. Now he stands not on soil, but in space, outlined in silver, his figure vast across the void. The hunter, bow raised, forever aimed toward memory. Sailors use him to find their way home. Lovers kiss beneath his belt of stars. And children, eyes wide with sleep, ask who he was. And the sky answers, not with thunder, but with stories. He is more than myth, more than constellation. He is what remains when the body fades but the tale endures. He is chase and silence, and the echo of feet across wild hills. He is the longing between stars. And so the sky remembered him, not as a god or a ghost, but as the boy who once walked like thunder and loved like the world was something worth losing for. The stars blink and wait, because in some dream, on some far-off night, he might rise again and run. Andromeda, the sea between stars, a chained heart, a sea monster's shadow, and a love that rose from the rocks into the sky. The curse spoke in her mother's name. The sea was calm when the curse was spoken. No thunder cracked, no wind howled, only stillness, as if the gods had leaned in closer, waiting. Cassiopeia, queen of Ethiopia, stood with her head high, her voice like a blade of silk. She had declared herself more beautiful than the Nereids, the sea nymphs, and she had done so not in whispers, but in mirrored halls, beneath open sky, where every word could echo into Olympus. The sea does not forget, and neither do the gods who guard it. Poseidon's fury did not arrive with waves. It came first in silence, then in floods, then in a shadow that crept up from the deep. The tides turned cruel, ships shattered in harbors once safe. The sky wept salt for days, and the people, frightened, starving, searching for someone to blame, turned not to their queen, but to her daughter, Andromeda, She was soft where her mother was proud. She listened more than she spoke. But blood is a bond the gods do not divide. The oracle spoke, and what it spoke was final. To save the kingdom, to calm the sea, Andromeda must be offered to the creature that stirred beneath the waves. The king wept behind closed doors. The queen did not, and the people gathered with ropes and silence. They dressed her in pale silk, a crown of lilies placed gently in her hair, not as a bride, but as a sacrifice. She walked without protest, her footsteps quiet as rain. "Let me face the sea," she whispered, "so I may see what comes for me." And when the chains wrapped cold around her skin, and the rock held her like a tomb, the stars blinked softly above, as if unsure whether they were watching a tragedy or the beginning of a myth. Chained to the rock beneath the stars, the rock was cruel beneath her spine, its shape carved not by kindness, but by centuries of wind and salt. Iron shackles clung to her wrists and ankles, tight as silence. Andromeda did not struggle. She sat tall against the stone, staring into the sea, waiting. The horizon stretched endlessly before her. Dark water meeting darker sky. No sails, no stars, no hope. Only the sound of the ocean breathing. Long, slow, deliberate, as if it knew what it was about to take. Her hair clung to her skin, soaked in spray and starlight. Her lips were chapped by wind, but her eyes held stories the sea could never drown. She remembered a dream she once had, of dancing in a garden, of someone calling her name, not with fear, but with wonder, someone who didn't look at her and see shame. The sky above was full now, diamonds scattered across velvet. Andromeda wondered if the stars had always been this close, or if her fear had sharpened her vision. Then the waves shifted, not gently, but with weight, a tremble beneath the tide, a change in rhythm, the sea no longer breathing, but growling, and she felt it, a pressure building in the deep, a pulse, like a heartbeat, that did not belong to any man. The monster was near, but still, she did not scream. Her thoughts drifted elsewhere, to the lullabies her nursemaid once sang, to the warmth of fresh bread and apricots in spring, to the idea, soft and foolish, that someone might come, and far across the sky, beyond clouds and fear and all things mortal, a figure did see her, wings slicing through starlight, sword drawn. He did not yet know her name, but already it echoed in his chest, Andromeda, and above them both, the stars began to turn. The monster in the foam. The sea boiled before it broke, not in a wave, but in a shape, a dark mass lifting from the deep, one eye at a time. Its breath came in hisses, thick as tar. Its scales were slick with ancient salt, its limbs like stone wrapped in kelp. The creature was not born. It was summoned. Andromeda watched it rise. Her chains trembled against the stone, but she did not. Terror moved through her like cold wind, quiet and quick, but beneath it, something steadier remained. Acceptance. She had never known the name of the thing that stirred in the sea, only that it came for her, only that she had been promised to it, like a gift no one wanted to give, but gave anyway. Its head breached the surface, too large, too close, eyes like molten pearls, unblinking, mouth opening in silence, not a roar, but a breath that pulled the air from her lungs. The stars above flickered, not out of fear, but out of recognition. They had seen this before. A girl offered to the sea, a promise kept in blood. Andromeda's fingers curled against the iron. She thought of the garden behind the palace, where wild violets grew between cracks in the stone. She remembered the smell of cinnamon from the baker's stall, the way the sun felt when she was young enough not to fear it. She thought of her name again, and how it did not belong in the mouth of a monster. The creature was closer now, close enough for her to see barnacles clinging to its jaw, close enough to see her own reflection in its eye. And then the sky cracked, not with thunder, but with wings. A figure burst from the stars above, sword gleaming, eyes locked on hers. He did not hesitate. He did not speak. He simply fell, like fate with feathers, and in the blink between her breath and the beast's roar, Andromeda, for the first time, closed her eyes, not in surrender, but in hope. The hero who wore her name like a prayer. He fell like starlight, quick, precise, beautiful. His name was Perseus, but she did not know that yet. All she saw was a flash of silver, a blade born of gods, and wings that caught the air like they belonged there. The monster turned too late. Its cry split the waves, but not the sky, because Perseus was already upon it. He did not call her name, but something about the way he looked at her made her feel known. His sword moved like a memory, curved, clean, certain. He had faced worse than this. He had stared into the eyes of stone and lived. The creature lunged, salt and teeth and time, but Perseus met it mid-breath, steel carving through shadow, blood hissing into the sea. Andromeda watched, not as a girl saved, but as someone seeing something ancient unfold. Not a rescue, but a rewriting. The chains at her wrists still held, but her heartbeat raced ahead of her. He struck again, and again, until the sea fell silent. The creature, broken, bled back into the deep, its shape swallowed by the same water that bore it. Only then did Perseus turn to her. Only then did she let her breath return. He flew to the rock, hovered just long enough to see her clearly. She did not speak, but something in her eyes asked him to remember this. He landed gently, and without a word, began to unfasten her chains. Iron fell away like a sigh. Andromeda stood, unsteady, salt-stained, glowing in the aftermath. She looked at him as if trying to remember a story she had never been told, and he looked back as if he already knew the ending. "Are you real?" she asked, voice barely more than wind. Perseus smiled. "Only if you are." And above them, the stars began to shift again, not by fate, but by choice. Wings of stone and salt. The wind softened after the beast fell, as if the sea itself had exhaled. The water no longer raged, no longer hissed. It rocked gently now, like a cradle remembering its child. Andromeda stood barefoot on the edge of the rock, her wrists red where the chains had kissed her, her dress torn, hair tangled with brine, but she stood tall, unbroken, unclaimed. Perseus stood beside her, sword sheathed, gaze steady. He did not reach for her. He did not bow. Instead, he waited. For what? She wasn't sure. Perhaps for the tide to shift, or for her to speak. She looked down at the sea one last time. Its surface shimmered with a strange kind of quiet, as if it too mourned the monster it had once hidden. "How did you find me?" she asked. "I didn't," he said softly. "You found me." She did not understand his meaning, but she felt its truth. Perseus unwrapped a small satchel from his belt. Inside it, a head, wrapped in linen and sealed in magic. The head of Medusa, stone deadly, but no longer needed. "I've faced shadows before," he said, but this one felt different, colder, older. Andromeda nodded slowly. "The gods were angry, but not at me." "I know," he whispered. They stood like that for a moment. Two strangers who had already shared too much. Salt crusted on their skin, stars blinking above. Then Perseus reached down and lifted a winged sandal from the sea-soaked ledge. He strapped it back to his foot and looked at her with something not quite a smile. "Will you come?" he asked. She did not ask where. She only looked up at the stars still turning, at the shape they had started to take. "Yes," she said, and with wings of stone and salt, they rose. A kingdom that forgot. They returned not as heroes, but as a silence that stole across the shore. The people gathered, unsure whether to bow or to run. Cassiopeia stood at the palace gates, her robes heavy with regret, her crown tilted slightly, as if it no longer fit. Andromeda stepped forward, barefoot still, unburdened now. She did not kneel, she did not scold. She only looked at her mother and asked, "Did you ever think I would return?" The queen's lips parted, but no sound came, only a flicker of something unspoken in her eyes. The king wept again, but softer this time, as if grief no longer needed to be loud. Perseus stood behind her, not as a conqueror, but as a witness. He said nothing, because Andromeda had already said enough. The people bowed eventually, one by one, ashamed not of what they had done, but of what they had allowed. Banners were raised, feasts were prepared, but none of it reached her. She wandered the palace halls like a shadow, touched her bed, her mirror, her old books. None of it felt hers. "Do you miss it?" Perseus asked her that night, as they stood on the balcony, watching stars ripple in the fountain below. "No," she said, "but I remember it." She closed her eyes and saw herself, not chained, but rising, not claimed, but chosen. The palace could never be home again, because she had tasted sky, and silence, and salvation. "Let them forget," she said, and turned toward the stars. She looked back only once. The sky welcomed them like an old song, each beat of the winged sandals stirring the stars. Below them, the kingdom faded, roofs shrinking, cliffs softening, until it was only a shadow tucked behind the clouds. Andromeda did not speak as they flew. Her silence was not empty. It was full of everything she had left behind. Perseus kept close, but he did not reach for her. He let her carry the weight of that moment in her own rhythm. The wind kissed her face gently, not like the sea's bite, but like a memory, soft around the edges. Beneath her, the dark curve of the ocean stretched forever. Above her, stars blinked with old secrets, and for a moment, she forgot the shape of her chains. They landed briefly on a cliff of marble, a place carved by gods, distant from the world. There, they sat in silence. "I don't know who I am without the chains," she said quietly. "You were never them," Perseus replied. "They were only the noise around your name." She let that sink into her skin, like warmth after winter. They spoke of little things after that. The taste of sun-warmed olives, the echo of bird calls across distant peaks, the way the moon looked when no one was watching. It was not love yet, but something tender was stirring, like starlight gathering into shape. When they rose to fly again, Andromeda turned her head, just once. She looked back at the land that had betrayed her, at the waves that had almost taken her, at the rock that had almost become her tomb. But it was no longer hers. The sky was wide and waiting. She looked forward again and did not look back a second time. The shape of her silence in the sky, when the gods saw her rise, they paused. For centuries, they had sculpted fates, tied hearts to tragedy, turned beauty into punishment. But this time, something shifted. They watched a girl, once chained to stone, now etched into the heavens. Andromeda, not as victim, but as constellation. She did not ask to be remembered, but they remembered her anyway. Stars arranged themselves gently, a soft arc across the night, a figure caught between falling and rising. They called her the chained maiden, but they missed the truth. She was not chained now. She was anchored to nothing. She was the shape of release. Below, sailors whispered her name before crossing stormy waters. Lovers traced her outline when words failed them. Daughters learned her story not as a warning, but as a song. Andromeda watched it all unfold from a place between breath and starlight. She was still herself, still flesh and memory, but now she belonged to something bigger. Not myth, not sorrow, but memory. Sometimes Perseus would speak her name like a prayer, not for help, but in reverence, and she would smile, that small, quiet smile she had learned on the cliff, no longer asking, only being. There, high above the sea, she shimmered, not brightly, but steadily, a soft reminder that even those offered to monsters can become stars, and that silence, when it is shaped by survival, can outshine any song. She had been broken, yes, but now she was sky. Gemini, the bond that split the sky, a bond forged in blood, torn by the gods, and reborn in the sky's eternal breath. When the sky was still a cradle, before constellations carved their names into the dark, before gods wept stars into the sea of heaven, there were only two boys, one born of dust and pulse, the other of flame and forever. Castor, the mortal twin, was breath and bruise, a heartbeat that thundered softly in the chest of a child who dreamed of things just beyond his reach. He cried like falling rain, fought like wind against stone, and laughed as though joy had a home inside his bones. Pollux, immortal, was the firelight that flickers but never dies, the son of Zeus, lightning sealed in skin, eyes that held the color of stormlit dawn. He came into the world silent, watching, as if listening to the music between the stars. They were born from the swan-swept arms of Leda, by the riverbanks of Sparta, where reeds whispered to the breeze, and their mother, trembling with awe, felt the universe shift beneath her ribs. That night, the stars pulsed a little closer, as if eager to witness what fate had stitched into the same womb. They were not the same, yet moved as if one shadow trailed them both. Where one turned, the other followed. Where one fell, the other bled. In the olive groves they chased echoes, hunted myths not yet written. Pollux with his bow, sharp as starlight. Castor with his spear, steady as the earth itself. They raced the moon, not to win, but to make sure neither vanished into the night alone. They spoke in glances, dreams continuing where the other's voice left off. And when they slept, the gods watched quietly, unable to understand what they had not forged themselves. For even Olympus, for all its storms and splendor, could not match what was born not from power, but from love. And in the hush before the sky scattered their names, the stars, still unformed, listened and waited. The thread between worlds. They grew like mirrored flames, two lives flickering in perfect rhythm. Castor, with skin kissed by sunlight and the ache of bruises earned. Pollux, with eyes that never dulled, though centuries already whispered at his feet. Where one stepped, the other echoed. Their hearts beat with the same music, even as the world began to hum a different song around them. They trained among kings, wrestled among gods, their names carved into the wind. Twin sons of Sparta whose bond could not be broken by blade nor boundary. Together, they sailed with Jason and the Argonauts, their laughter echoing across the sea. Pollux's fists struck like comets, Castor's aim true as moonlight threading a needle. The legends grew, but beneath each triumph, a silence stirred, a silence that deepened in the space between their hands. For Castor, no matter how strong, was flesh and breath and limit. Pollux, no matter how kind, was carved from eternity's shadow. Nights grew heavier. In dreams, Castor fell from cliffs that had no end. Always Pollux reached, always too late. And though the sun rose like a wound dressed in gold, the ache never fully left. Once, by a fire that hissed against the wind, Pollux whispered, "Let me give you my forever." But Castor only smiled, that tired smile that said he had already counted the years he'd never see. "I'll take your memory over your immortality," he said, "because I want to be remembered by the one who never forgets." Pollux wept quietly then, not because he could die, but because he couldn't. And so the thread pulled tighter, days passing like falling feathers, one touched by time, one untouched, yet slowly unraveling inside. The gods, watching still, saw what they had not foreseen, that love, when honest, does not need eternity, only presence, only the promise that when one voice fades, the echo will remain. And above, the stars began to shiver, as if they too sensed what the world would soon lose. Where mortality bled through the light, it came not with thunder, nor some glorious war cry, but with the hush of an ambush, the silence that falls just before grief takes root. One arrow from a nameless hand, meant for another, but fate, careless as ever, let it find Castor. He fell like starlight breaking against the earth. No roar, no resistance, only a gasp, like breath slipping through fingers too slow to close. Pollux heard it before he saw. The silence, the sudden absence of a heartbeat that once beat in time with his own. He ran across the field, the blood, the dust, the world tilting sideways as his knees struck the ground. "Castor," he whispered, but the eyes that always mirrored his own were already losing focus. already looking beyond him, beyond the sky. The gods, unmoved, watched from their distant thrones. Zeus, his immortal father, silent. For what could divinity say to a son now broken, to a heart now halved? Pollux screamed, not in rage, but in something deeper, the cry of one who has never known loneliness, and now tastes it in the air like ash. He begged, "Take my immortality, take my breath, split my soul if it means I don't wake without him." But eternity, cruel in its symmetry, cannot be bargained with easily. Zeus listened, for once, and offered a compromise only sorrow could accept. Half here, half there, half in Olympus, half in Hades, one twin above, one below, and so it was. Pollux, still breathing, would feel his soul pulled downward with every sunrise. Castor, still fading, would feel the tug of his brother's heartbeat pulling him back. Each day a goodbye, each night a reaching, until even the stars wept, and the heavens cracked, not from thunder, but from a love too vast to fit within a single world. The day the stars took pity. Gods are rarely moved, but even Olympus has its moments of mercy, moments when even immortality feels the weight of what it cannot touch. Pollux wandered, lost between Olympus and shadow, his fists still clenched, but now against fate. Every moment without Castor a century of silence. He no longer laughed, no longer raced the wind or challenged the sun. He simply sat beneath the stars, waiting for one to fall back into his arms. Zeus watched, and perhaps he remembered what it meant to love without borders, to lose, to long, to ache. So he made an offering to the sky. They cannot be men, not anymore, he said, but let them be stars. And so, with breathless grace, he lifted them from their grief. Castor, from the underworld, Pollux, from the cliffs of morning, together again, threaded not by time or mortality, but by light. The constellations shimmered into existence, two stars side by side, never touching, always near, their shapes drawn into myth, their names whispered by sailors and stargazers alike. Gemini, the twins, a reminder that even death cannot silence a bond born of true devotion, that even the coldest gods can be swayed by a love that refuses to fade. And so they watch, night after night, above lovers' kisses and children's dreams, above wars and weddings, silences and songs. Two brothers, still chasing each other across the heavens, forever split, forever one. Beneath the light that was once a face, in the hush between constellations, where silence blooms like frost on forgotten dreams, the world below kept spinning. But for Pollux, time had unraveled. Though Castor now glowed beside him, though stars had cradled what flesh could not hold, the ache remained, not in the sky, but in the space between what once was and what would never be again. He would watch the earth from above, children laughing beneath olive trees, brothers racing through fields of gold. And every time he saw them, the echoes of what once was theirs alone, he missed the weight of Castor's step, the way his shadow fell just slightly ahead, the way they used to speak without words, trading glances like oaths. And though they were together again, it wasn't the same, because stars do not bleed, stars do not cry, and in the stillness of the sky, nothing can reach the way a hand once could. Some nights, Pollux would dim, ever so slightly, a flicker barely noticed by mortal eyes, but the moon saw it and whispered stories of the weeping twin to the tides. Below, temples rose in their name, offerings laid gently on stone altars, fathers pointing upward. Those are the Gemini, brothers bound beyond death. But stories never tell the whole truth. They forget that one still grieves, that immortality does not quiet longing, it only stretches it endlessly. And so, Pollux learned to wait, to let his love echo through centuries, to find meaning not in what he lost, but in the way the stars now watched the world together. He could no longer hold Castor, but he could hold the sky beside him. And for now, that was enough to keep shining. What the wind whispers to the stars. Far below, where olive branches swayed in sleep and sea foam whispered against tired shores, mortals still called their names. Gemini, the twins who could not be parted, even by death. And though their tales slipped into myth, into bedtime murmurs and carved marble, it lived in every pair of hands that reached for another, every soul that searched for its missing piece. Castor and Pollux became more than stars. They became promise. The wind would carry their names across oceans. Sailors traced their constellation for luck, for safe passage. Lovers kissed beneath their glow, whispering wishes too fragile for day. But among the stars, the brothers whispered to each other still. Remember that hill, the one we raced down after the storm? Pollux would murmur, and Castor would reply, soft as moonlight, I let you win. Their laughter, faint as comet trails, shimmered between galaxies. And sometimes, in the deep hours of night, a shepherd would look up, and for just a breath, he would feel them, that strange warmth behind the stars, like a memory, just out of reach. Castor, once bound to dust, now luminous. Pollux, once broken by grief, now whole. But even so, they knew eternity could not replace touch. So they kept their bond alive in stories, in winds, in every twin heartbeat that stumbled and found rhythm again. The stars do not forget, and neither did they. Not the pain, not the love, and especially not each other. The sky remembers the shape of their names. There are nights when the sky hums, not with thunder, not with light, but with memory. And on those nights, the stars seem to lean closer, as if the universe itself is listening to something ancient, something soft, the way one might listen to a lullaby sung long ago. In those hushes between the constellations, Castor and Pollux drift in quiet orbit, not lost, not searching, just being. Two lights breathing in rhythm, two souls suspended in the silence only they can share. Sometimes, Castor turns his gaze downward, to the lands that once knew his footsteps, to the rivers where he once dove headfirst with laughter in his lungs, to the earth where his name still echoes in dust and olive leaves. Pollux watches too, watches with a tenderness shaped by centuries, because to love across time, across planes of being, is to become a guardian of echoes. Together, they trace the shape of their names in the stars, not just Gemini, but every nickname whispered between them, every shout across fields, every song half sung at dusk, all of it, remembered. They are not forgotten, not by each other, not by the wind that still calls them home. And the sky, vast and velvet and breathing, carries them like a vow, not sealed in stone, but in light. A vow that says, even gods cannot break what love has already made immortal. So they shine, not because they must, but because shining is the only language left for love that outlived its own heartbeat. And in the warmth of their glow, the stars remember, and in remembering, they become. Where the constellations finally breathe, and so it ends, not with silence, but with breath, not the breath of mortals, or the wind, but the breath of the stars themselves, exhaling across eternity. Once, they were two boys chasing shadows across sunlit hills. Once, they bled and laughed and dared the world to tear them apart. And now, they are the sky's lullaby, a soft duet in the firmament, always together, never fading. The gods had tried to split them, tried to remind the world that life was measured by endings, but the brothers had other plans. They wrote their defiance in stardust, in every shimmer that crossed the night. They became more than memory, they became a promise, that no love forged true could ever be truly undone. Pollux, no longer grieving, but glowing, and Castor, no longer slipping away, but held in the arms of eternity. They do not speak now, they no longer need to. Their silence is not absence, it is presence too full to name. And below, when lovers lift their faces to the night, when brothers share a secret smile in the dark, the stars lean in and listen, because somewhere in that glittering hush, Castor and Pollux still dance, not bound by flesh, not broken by death, but free, forever written into the breath of the cosmos. And if you listen closely, you'll hear them in the quiet between heartbeats, in the pause before dawn, in the sky where love never ends and the bond never breaks.